So here's a great tool. And I think if you leave with nothing else today from me, I think take this with you. When you are approaching your cadences or your sequences and you're saying, this is how many touches I have, these are the channels, and this is the content that I'm applying to each of those channels and each of those touches, give yourself a score. Give yourself a +1 if you are adding value. You're sharing a link, you're giving a statistic, you're sharing a case study, you are solving a problem, you are anticipating some of their needs based on research that you've done. If you're adding value objectively, give yourself a +1. If you are asking for something, right, give yourself a -1. If it's totally neutral, if you're just sharing something, it's not super valuable, you're not sure if it's going to really move the needle for your buyer, negate it, right? Give yourself a 0. At the end of your cadence, you should be positive. Your score should be positive. Think about a cadence or a sequence like a bank account. It is a give and it is a take, right? It is an add and it is an ask. And if you break that up into a long running value add, questions like, when should I bump my email? Or when should I start a new cadence around a new topic? Or how do I take this really meaty piece of content and break it up into a couple of key takeaways that an executive might come away with? It's a good way for you to understand if you're just asking for something. Hey, when can I get time? When are you available? Are you free tomorrow? Did you see my email? I'm going to leave you alone now. Are you on an island somewhere? Like, did an alligator eat you? You start to see, like, am I cutting through the noise? Am I being a value-centric, customer-first, buyer-centric? Am I creating an experience that I would want to receive if I were Daniel, right? Because he said he gets a lot. Or am I just being a little bit self-serving and trying to meet my KPIs? So, it's not a surefire way to say, when do you start a new thread? But if you're starting a thread and you're saying, here's something of value, this is cutting through the noise, this is how we're differentiated, whatever I'm saying in this email can be taken and going to get an attention of someone somewhere else because it is so valuable. If you bump that email with an ask, now you're at 0, right? So you're not in the red yet, but the next touch point needs to be something of value. So I think use that as a way to determine, when do we thread? How do I break up content? And how do I make sure that I'm super value centric? Think about your cadences or sequences like a bank account, and you do not want an overdraft fee.
In terms of like weaving triggers into my outreach, it's basically like my North Star of the why I'm reaching out. My theory is that if I don't have a good reason to reach out to someone, I shouldn't reach out. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to connect the dots in their mind of what my messaging is. And it's a waste of my time. It's probably a waste of their time. So I'm a big fan of using triggers as the relevant reason you're reaching out. And the way that I do that is develop a point of view or a hypothesis or make an observation. So if I see that someone is leading the learning and development efforts at XYZ company, I may say, hey, how is leading learning and development at company, and then comma their name. I'm making an observation that I've done some kind of research, and then I'm trying to propose a common problem that we hear from learning and development managers, sharing how we can potentially solve, and then asking them if it's interesting enough to learn more. So the trigger ties to the problem statement, which ties to how we can help. And there's so many different types of triggers, but make sure that whatever the reason is for you reaching out, it ties back to the problem. And so I always say personalization without relevancy, my opinion, this may be like a hot take, I think it's useless in a sense, because it's not relative to what the main point of your email is. So I think personalization is great so long as it's relevant. So
I can hear John Barrows clapping from Boston right now. I can hear him clapping. Do you guys hear it? I hear it.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I know where you went to college, or I know that you like dogs, and then that's, you don't mention, you don't like, it's.
I heard you have a brain, so I'd like to connect, right?
Exactly. So I think it's great if you can tie the personalized nugget to like a relevant problem that you can solve. I think it's amazing, but a lot of times we can't, and it comes off like inauthentic to the prospect.
So let's talk a little bit about what people should be looking at when they're analyzing their cadences here. not looking for just replies. Why is this so important? Any one of you are great sales leaders. So why is this important that leaders realize just focusing on replies defeats the purpose, the real value behind using Cadence software?
I mean, without understanding the layer of the sentiment, if you got 20 replies that said, please remove me from your list or unsubscribe, that's a false positive, right? So now that technology is starting to catch up with this stuff, you're starting to overlay AI that understands things like remove or unsubscribe or the word not interested. We can start to qualify what a response really is. In a technical sense, a proper reply to an email that you send, a reply is a reply is a reply, right? And so if we're just looking at that metric, but we're not disaggregating what the sentiment of those emails were, right? We're not getting the full story. You could say, oh my gosh, this cadence is so successful. This sequence is driving a 10% reply rate. And yet, if they're all no's, you're not actually booking those meetings. You're not getting those demos. You're not creating that pipeline, which in a prospecting sense is where we want to be. I would also say best in class, and Anthony and Daniel, I'm curious what you see here. When we're talking about a cold outbound cadence, I typically like to say anything in the 5 to 10 range is good. Anything above double digits is exceptional. However, if we're talking about upgrades, expansions, if we're talking about cadences that are driving meeting attendance or thanking people for joining a demo, if we're doing webinar registrations, all of those are going to have different benchmarks for replies. So we come back to where we started, which is, what is the commercial objective of this cadence, right? What are we trying to do with this sequence? If it is generate attention, book meetings so that you can create an opportunity because those are your KPIs, use that. 5 to 10 is good, 10 plus is great. But Anthony, Daniel, what do you use for like outbound cadence sequence reply rate benchmarks?
The last stat that I saw, which is a pretty shitty stat across the industry, is like anything above 2% is technically good. Like it's like the benchmark is so low right now for being good at email is like, it's ridiculous. To your point, Lily, it depends on what it is. Like there was a time that I ran an inbound demo request cadence and the first email had like 82% reply rate, because it's an inbound and it's a demo request, right? And we were responding to it like within 5 minutes. So the reply rate was ridiculously high. I would say if you're doing outbound to existing customers that already know about you, it might still be an outbound cadence because you're prospecting for new products. Then you can very much say 15-20% is a good number. Anything above that is great. But realistically, like if you're getting 5 to 10% on a pure cold email, you're doing very, very well. I would say like a lot of like, it also depends on like how clean is your contact data. Like you're never going to get above a 2% if you don't have a good contact data solution. So like there's so many technical things that go into like boosting your reply rates and your open rates. It's wild. I would want to say though, open rates are incredibly important. I know a lot of folks kind of look at them as a bit of a vanity metric, but it's like anything else. It's like if you're running a cycle, you need intro meetings. And if you don't have intro meetings, then you're never going to get to the close. It's the exact same thing with open rates. If you get a 5% reply rate on a 20% open rate versus an 80% open rate, you got significantly more replies on that 80% open rate, even though your reply rate is the exact same. So that is something that you want to constantly optimize for. And it's not just subject line that goes into open rates. There's a ton of technical stuff that goes into it. Your email signatures, whether or not you're adding more than 2 links in a first email. That first line is way more important than your subject line right now, because everybody looks at the preview text in their email providers now instead of the subject line. And if it says, hey, I'm your account executive attached to your account in this territory, like it's automatic delete without opening it. So that first line is incredibly important to boost up your numbers now.